Okay, so welcome back. We're continuing on with our study of the community rule. So we ended off in this area here. I think we're going to back up just a little bit. So at the part that we're at, it says, anyone entering the council of the community, coming into covenant of Elohim, under the eyes of all the volunteers of holiness. Volunteers of holiness are the members of the community, because it said back here that these are the rules for the men of the community freely volunteering to turn aside from all evil. So then we get down here, anyone entering into the council of the community, which I guess that would be like anyone entering. I don't know if this means the community itself. I guess maybe we'll get some clarification further down. But this could be either the community itself, or maybe there was a council of leadership, and so anyone entering the council of the community, coming into the covenant of Elohim under the eyes of all the volunteers, shall swear upon his soul with a binding oath to return to the Torah of Moses. So I don't think this is like a council, like a city council. I think this is all of the members of the community. And so anyone entering into the community, essentially, coming into covenant of Elohim under the eyes of all the volunteers for holiness, shall swear upon his soul with a binding oath to return to the Torah of Moses and everything that it commanded with all his heart and with all his soul, according to all that was revealed concerning it to the sons of Zadok, and according to the majority of the men of the covenant. One thing they did is they did things democratically in the Essene communities. Josephus mentioned that. So according to the majority of the men of the covenant, that would be according to the rules that they've established through their voting process. And according to Josephus, once they voted on something, once the majority made a decision, that decision was irrevocable. Like they couldn't go back and, it's not like the political process nowadays where you'll vote on something, and if you don't get your way, you go back and, summon up some more support, and then you come out and call for a revote now that you've got all your people behind you in order to get your will. With the Essenes, they would only vote one time for a matter, and then it was established. According to the majority of the men of the covenant and volunteers of the community for his truth, in order to walk in his will, and that which he swore upon his soul by the covenant, to separate from all the men of unrighteousness, walking in the way of evil. So you got to separate from all the men of unrighteousness as part of the compact that you're coming into. For they, the men of unrighteousness, are not to be reckoned in his covenant, since they have not asked concerning or studied his laws to know the hidden things, in which they have gone astray to their own guilt, and because they did the revealed things with a contempt, kindling the wrath for judgment, and for the avengers of the vengeance of the curses of the covenant, to execute upon them the majestic judgments of eternal destruction without a remnant. So these men of unrighteousness, they appear to have some knowledge of the assembly, because it says that they did the revealed thing. So it appears that the men of unrighteousness walking in the way of evil is some people that left the community. They were members of this assembly, they left. They did not ask concerning or studying his laws, so somebody who seems to have rejected the Torah and went off on their own doctrine. He shall not enter the water in order to touch the purity of the men of holiness, for they shall not be cleansed, even if they turn away from their wickedness, because all breakers of his word are polluted. Therefore no one should cooperate with him in his work or his purse, lest he contract guilty sinfulness. So this also, it still appears to be that they're talking about someone that has been kicked out of the community. I don't believe this is speaking about the new person coming in. So he shall not enter the water to, again, this is speaking about immersion, what we call baptism, in order to touch the meal. And you also see this extreme separation, the same thing that you see in the Nazarene Acts with Kepha, where he wouldn't have table fellowship with someone who was not baptized. Rather, he shall distance himself from him in everything, as it is written, keep away from all things that are lying. Okay, so now we're seeing, this has something to do with lying. Again, I think this comes down to the spouter of lies from the Habakkuk Pesher and from the Damascus document. There's this individual that's the subject of a lot of their polemics that apparently is a spouter of lies, a comedian, and a boaster. Therefore, no man among the men of the community shall acquiesce to their authority in any matter. In any matter of Torah or judgment. No man among the men of the community may acquiesce to their authority in any matter of Torah or judgment. He shall not eat anything by means of their purse, or drink, or take anything from their hands whatsoever, except for payment, as it is written, keep away from the man whose breath is in his nostrils, for of what is he reckoned? Since one should separate from all those not reckoned in his covenant, from them and from all that is theirs. Okay, so what are these references? Okay, this Galatians 2:12, that is about, that's where Peter withdrew from the Gentiles, and he was confronted by Paul. And again, it appears that may actually be what Kepha was doing, is fulfilling or abiding by this part of the text. This reference, Isaiah 2:22, that's speaking about separating from men and going and hiding in the caves, essentially, almost like what you picture the Essene community doing, is going and living in the caves. It's a section of Isaiah that really kind of fits what we're reading here. 2 Corinthians 6:16 is about keeping away from idols. In fact, I think we got it pulled up here still. What union has the dwelling place of Elohim with idols? For your dwelling place of the living Elohim, Elohim said, I shall dwell among them, walk among them. Therefore come out from among them and separate, says Yeshua, do not touch them. So, separate from them and from all that is theirs. Eisman saying basically compare that to 2 Corinthians 6:16. No man of holiness shall contract any unclean work, for unclean are those who do not know his covenant, and anyone who has contempt for his word will be eradicated from the world, because of all his works are unclean. Before him and all his possessions are polluted. And when someone enters the covenant to do according to these laws, again, note the emphasis on doing. Okay, so to do according to all these laws, to become one with the holy assembly, they shall examine his spirit in the community, one man towards his neighbor, with respect to his mentality and the works of the Torah. On the testimony of the sons of Aharon, the volunteers in the community, to erect his covenant and command all the laws which he commanded them to do, and upon the testimony of the many of Israel, the volunteers turning aside into the community, supporting his covenant. And they shall inscribe them in the order, one after another, according to his intelligence and his works, so that each man will obey his fellow, the man of lower rank obeying the higher. So it's one thing you see throughout the Qumran literature, is that there's different levels of standing within the community. So if you're like, you can be the Mavaker, who would be like James the Just, who's the head of the entire assembly, and then under him were three, the three pillars. And so well, Yeshua was a Mavacher. He was the head of the assembly. And under him were the three pillars, which was Peter, James, and John. And then under them was the rest of the 12. So it's kind of the same thing in this community. Of course, under the 12, then there were the 72. So you have this hierarchy structure. And something we see mentioned in here is that you work your way up in rank. And they shall examine their spirit and their works year after year, so that a man can be advanced according to his intelligence in the perfection of the way, or lowered according to the infractions he has committed. Each man should admonish his neighbor in truth, meekness, and love of piety toward the man. So, the goal that you're striving for is to move up in piety. And everyone is examined every year. One should not speak to his brother angrily or abusively or stubbornly or with animus or an evil spirit. One should not hate another because of his uncircumcised heart, but rather reprove him the very same day, so as not to bring sin upon himself. It sounds very similar to things we read in the New Testament. And in addition, a man should not bring something he has against his neighbor before the many, before which he did not first reprove him before witnesses. Again, you see this mentioned by Yeshua, and I think even Paul, even the apostate mentions this. First you come before them privately, and then if they don't listen, then you come before them with witnesses. And if they don't listen, if you come to them with witnesses, then you bring it before the assembly. It's kind of the same thing we see here. In these rules they shall walk wherever they dwell, each man toward his neighbor, and the lower is to obey the higher in work and in purse, wherever they find themselves. They shall eat in common, pray in common, and deliberate in common. Wherever there are 10 men from the council of the community, there should not be lacking among them a man who is a priest, and each man shall sit before the council according to his rank, and they shall be asked their outlook on something, on everything, and it shall be when they prepare the table to eat and the new grapes to drink, the priest shall stretch out his hand first to bless the first fruits of the bread or the new grapes. Okay, so the question is, was Yeshua drinking wine? You see this footnote about wine, because one of the things that I was kind of confused about was that one of the things that I keep seeing come up about the Essenes and the Nazarenes is that they didn't eat meat, but they also didn't drink wine or strong drink. And I wonder, it's like, well, how are they? What about all the drinking of wine in the New Testament? According to this, now it was new wine, so it wasn't fermented. And now the thing is that nowadays we have this pasteurized grape juice. So you buy like Welch's grape juice, and there's no alcohol in it because they squeeze the grapes, they heat the grape juice, and it kills all the yeast in it, and they package it that way so that there's no fermentation. But back in the days of Yeshua, if you squeezed grapes, you'd have to ferment them just to preserve the wine. And you could have grapes just laying out in the sun, and they're going to ferment. There's videos on YouTube where you can see animals that got drunk eating fruit on the ground that had fermented. And so it was easy for to have fermented wine, but the question is, how could they drink wine and it not have alcohol in it? Well, here you see why. It's because they are specifically new grapes. So it's new grape juice. So it almost looks like it was fresh squeezed. And so that would be how, I'm sure it has some alcohol in it, but they're not talking about heavily fermented wine here. And see, here's another thing, something I didn't consider until I watched a video on this recently, was that back in this time period, if you were drinking wine, it was wine that had been stored in the carcass of an animal, a skinned animal. So they skin this animal, they take its skin, and they fill the skin with wine. And so if they were not eating meat, this would explain why they would not have drank wine either, because they would not have wanted to drink this wine that had been inside of a dead animal. And I think this right here, this part of the community rule, answers a big question that I had. So what they were doing is they were just, when they were preparing the pure food, they were squeezing the grape juice fresh. And if it had a little bit of fermentation in it, from just being picked and not squeezed immediately, that probably wouldn't have been enough to affect anything. But I couldn't imagine them drinking wine out of a dead animal carcass. And so reading this, it actually kind of fills in a blank for me. Okay. It says, and the text repeats itself, and in the place where 10 are present, there shall never lack a man to study the Torah day and night, always a man taking the place of his brother, and the many shall keep vigil together for a third of the nights of the year, for a third of all the nights of the year, to read in the book and to seek judgment and pray together. So here, is the gnosis, like the people that are trying to say, like, oh yeah, those Essenes, they were Gnostic. Well, they stayed up all night studying the Torah. If that makes them Gnostic, I'd like to be Gnostic. I'd like to be able to stay up all night studying the Torah. This is not the Gnosticism that you see condemned in the early church. This is very pious men, just like Josephus and Philo and all these other people reported. This is the rule for the assembly of many, each according to his rank. The priest will sit down first, and then the elders second, and the remainder of all the people will sit down, each according to his rank. And in this manner they shall be examined with regard to any judgment, any opinion, or any matter concerning the many, so that each can impart his knowledge to the council of the community. A man shall not start speaking during the speech of his neighbor until his brother has finished speaking, nor shall he speak ahead of someone ranked ahead of him. Rather, the man questioned shall respond in his turn. In the session of the many, a man shall not say anything without the permission of the many, and indeed without the permission of the overseer over the many. And any man who has something to say to the many, but is not of the rank of standing of someone, can question the council of community, but is not of the rank of someone who can question the council of the community. Let that man stand up on his feet and say, there is something I have to say to the many. If they permit him, then let him speak. Okay, so this is just talking about the order of meetings and the way they would conduct them. One of the things that me and the assembly that I participate in, one of the things that we do is that if someone has a message, that we don't interrupt them. So like even if someone's giving a presentation, even if it's something you disagree with, you can't just interrupt them and start arguing with them. You have to wait until they finish speaking. You have to let them give their presentation. Doesn't always happen. We have some people that will throw a little hissy fit and start yelling and screaming, but if they disagree with someone, but we generally those people will root themselves out and end up leaving. But we try to have a policy or encourage anyone to have their time to speak. But then if you present an argument about something and we find it lacking, then we don't accept it, but you are at least given the floor to try and make your case. There are some exceptions to that. If you went in and you was trying to teach something that was deeply heretical, like worshiping idols or something like that, then you're not going to get to present that kind of case. But any kind of like a doctrinal issue, we'll hear what you have to say. Okay, if they permit him, they let him speak. And the man commanding the head over the many shall examine any volunteer from Israel wishing to join the council of the community with regard to his mentality and his works. And if he meets the qualifications, he shall admit him into the covenant, to turn aside to truth and to turn away from all unrighteousness. And he shall inform him about all the judgments of the community. And after this, when he comes to stand before the many, they shall consider all his words, and on the basis of the result of the casting of lots by the council of many, he shall either be included or excluded. So again, this is something that we see in the New Testament, this casting lots to make important decisions. If he draws near the council of the community, he shall not touch the purity or the pure food of the many until they examine him as to his spirit and his works, until 1 full year is completed. Neither shall he mix his property with that of the many, and when he completes 1 full year within the community, the many shall examine him as to his words with regards to his outlook and his works of the Torah. And if the results of the casting of lots by the priest and the multitude for the men of the covenant is that he enter the foundation of the community, they shall also admit his property and his belongings into the hand of the man who is the overseer of the property of the many, and it shall be written in the ledger to his account, and the many shall not be able to withdraw it, but he shall not touch the drink of the many until he has completed the 2nd full year among the men of the community. And when he has completed the 2nd year, he will be examined by the many, and if the casting of lots results in his finally being brought into the community, they shall enter him into the order according to his rank among his brothers, for Torah, judgment, and purity. His belongings shall be merged with theirs, and his counsel will be merged with the community, as well as will his judgment. Okay, so essentially, if you're going to join the community, you have to pass, it looks like 3 different casting of lots. And so you will be, when you're first brought in, they'll take your possessions. You'll give your possessions to the community, but they keep them separated for the 1st year. And then the 2nd year, they'll go ahead and mix in your possessions with theirs, but they keep a ledger of it, of how much is yours. And then at the end of the 3rd year is when you actually become a full-fledged member, and you're 100% brought in, and what's yours is theirs, and what's theirs is yours. Like everyone holds everything in common. And these are the judgments upon which they shall judge his words in the investigation by the community. If a man is found among them who knowingly lied concerning his property, they shall separate him from the purity of the many for 1 year, and he will do penance with 1/4 of his bread. Now, this is something unusual, is that when you entered the community, you would take an oath not to eat anything except for the pure food of the community. So if you were kicked out of the community, then your choices were to either starve to death, or you would be eating whatever grew on its own. Like you could eat, I think one of the sources said, the grass of the field. Like you could go out and pick wild herbs and eat them and live off the land that way, but you couldn't go back into the city and eat the food of the city, or bread outside of the community itself, because you took an oath not to. So a lot of these Essenes, if they were kicked out, they would either starve to death, or they would get to the point of starvation that the assembly would have pity on them and allow them to come back in. But according to the rules, they were supposed to be either expelled for a year, or possibly even permanently. So it looks like in this particular punishment, you're given 1/4 of your bread. So if you can imagine just eating 1/4 of your diet, which in itself would be better than being expelled from the community altogether and starving to death. So it may seem extreme, but I think a lot of people who are very devout believers, they can seem extreme to people who don't believe. So this may seem really foreign to us, but this is the reality of what these oaths meant to him. It's a life or death situation. If he answers this, and in fact that may be why Kepha withdrew from those people in that community. Kepha thought he was going into the community of Essenes and that he was eating this pure food, and then he come to find out that he wasn't. And so he withdrew because he couldn't sit there and eat that food that was not of the proper purity because he had taken this oath. We're not told exactly what it was with regards to Kepha withdrawing. The only thing we're told by Paul is that it was because these people showed up from James. And so we don't know really what the issue is, and I'm not really sure if Paul would have honestly told us what the issue was. But I do think a lot of this is related to what happened with Kepha. It says, if he answers his brother rudely or speaks to him impatiently, insulting his honor and disobeying the authority of his fellow inscribed in the ledger ahead of him, or if he has raised his hand against him, he will do penance for 1 whole year and shall be excluded. If any man utters the glorious name in a blasphemous manner, whether in jest or as a result of some reversal or for any other reason, even if while reading the book or praying, he shall be expelled and return no more to the council of the community. And if he speaks to, think about that. I mean, if you spoke, I guess this would be the tetragrammaton. If you spoke Yahuwah's name in a blasphemous manner, that would be pretty much a death sentence. You would be expelled from the community, and you wouldn't be able to come in anymore. And again, that oath that I mentioned earlier. You took an oath not to eat anything that wasn't part of the community food. And if he speaks to one of the priests inscribed in the book in anger, he shall do penance for 1 year and be separated on pain of death from the purity of the many. And if he spoke unintentionally, he will do penance for 6 months. And whoever has deliberately lied, he will do penance for 6 months. And whoever deliberately insults his fellow without cause will do penance for 1 year and be separated. And whoever speaks to his fellow deceptively or knowingly behaves deceitfully with him shall do penance for 6 months. Something that just occurred to me, I was thinking about, Yeshua's disciples when they were passing through the cornfields and they picked the corn and were eating it as they walked. And the different episodes that we see when when Yeshua would be teaching and the multitude would be on the verge of starvation. I wonder if any of those type of instances had anything to do with these dietary oaths that they took. Like maybe the people were in danger of starving to death because they'd been outside of the community and they didn't have the prepared food. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it's just a thought that occurred to me. And if he has been negligent with his fellow, his penance is 3 months. And if he has been negligent with the property of the community, causing loss, he shall repay it in full. And if he is unable to repay it, he shall do penance for 60 days. And whoever has unjustly borne malice against his fellow shall do penance for 1 year. And one thing that you see, a theme you see throughout the scriptures is this casting out people from the kingdom. It also sounds very similar to what's being talked about here. If you break these commands, then you're cast out for a period. And speaking about gnashing of teeth, that imagine how upset you would be about that if you were cast out for a year and you had to scrounge around and eat wild herbs for a year just trying to survive to get back into the community where you could have an actual meal. Okay, well, God, this is taking a lot longer than I thought it would. Okay, we're going to take another break here, and we'll come back with part 4. That should finish us up. So, thanks for listening.